Okay, so as you guys know, I'm Martin Fessard. I'm an architect and a carpenter. I'm starting like a thesis project, which is named Architecture Taking the Risk of the Living World, which is about architectural design and bio-based materials. And I will be doing it with Béatrice Mariol and Franck Vermondel, who are both teachers at Lille Architecture School and who are architects. And Vincent Dubois, who is working researcher in civil engineer and basically working about mud techniques and mud concrete. And it will take place in the former mining areas of Nord-Pas-de-Calais, in the mining cities, which are now parts of the World Heritage UNESCO. And so one of the focus is to work about renovation, not new bio-based materials. So during this conference, I'll try to explain learnings and questions that turned up while I was working as a carpenter. So about wood, about bio-based material, about design issues linked to these materials, and about also aesthetics, and how we want to experiment further about those questions in this thesis project. So it's going to be a quite simple lecture. I'm going to show you like pictures of building I've worked on mostly. Sometimes like very simple example, like even small shelters, and I'll try to share with you how this those practical example can lead to other practical and theoretical issues. And of course, I will try to focus on the questions which are linked to the workshop. So about especially about ornaments. Just to present myself, I had a very short experience in an architecture office after school, architecture school, and then I decided to do an apprenticeship in a construction cooperative, which was named Plumb Line. In French, it's fil à plomb, which is based in the countryside in the west of France, and it had a very strong ecological interest. So about working with like local materials that you can just gather around the construction site. So we were working with, well, of course, like lots of kind of tree species you can find in the west of France, rubble stones, mud, what else I know, straw sometimes, hemp. And one of the goals was to do a kind of what we call une architecture de collecte, de récolte, which means a kind of harvest architecture. So you just collect things in the countryside and you build with them. Actually, in reality, it's not that easy, and sometimes it's more difficult because you have regulations and you have delay, well, not delay, but you have timings for the construction, and sometimes you have to buy, of course, materials, industrial materials too. But yes, the general idea was just to pick, collect, nurture, pay attention to natural resources and not try to exploit them in an industrial way. So I think the main issue that I saw working for this cooperative was that it was very inventive, like technically, about renovation, about construction with like bio-based material and local material. For example, there is a shelter here, very small shelter, which is built by a chestnut tree. All the poles you can see, they are made of chestnut, which we recolted like I don't know, 100 meters maybe. For those who were here yesterday, it's a bit the same as Frédéric Epo explained, like chestnuts, it can trees very fast from when you cut it. Then there is like new branches growing very fast, and they are quite straight, and you can use them to make poles. And yeah, it's like well, a very simple way to use this material and to create some architecture with it, and not try to like buy materials from like wood, which would come from I don't know, some forest in Germany or in Australia. So this this cooperative, it was very inventive technically. For example, here we have hemp insulation by the outside of like 20th century house. But I would say that there was relatively no thinking about design and design issues and design processes and about aesthetic or about habitability of what we were doing. For example, this kind of weird stairs. So yeah, we just used again like some chestnut tree and cut them in half, and yeah, that make a pole. And yeah, you still see like the shape of the tree, and it's interesting in a way because I think people can relate to that quite easily because they know what it is. They know it's a tree, and now it's like a timber frame. But still, I think there is like no real link, you know, to the house which was built behind. Maybe there is no thinking about how it fits in the general landscape, about proportions, about how you how you go from the above to the garden. Like the terrace is very small. There is maybe not much thing you can do on it. So yeah, like very inventive technically, but no thinking about design processes. Yeah, the same like this house we built. It was built with Douglas fir, which is an interesting wood because you can build with it without chemical treatments. It's like naturally resistant to water, so it's cool because you don't use chemicals. And the insulation was made with old newspaper. So yeah, it's the same, very inventive, but yeah, it just doesn't fit in the landscape, and it's very massive, and so yeah, not so interesting about architecture. And no, we're not here yet. Actually, one of the idea of the thesis is to make a kind of link between those technical questions and architectural design issues. And for example, if we can take the example of authors which have already seen the link between society, technique, culture, environment. For example, Lewis Mumford, who wrote in 1934 a book called Technique and Civilization. And he says, technical improvements alone cannot give socially significant results, nor maximum industrial efficiency. And then he adds that aesthetic structure and social relationships are as real as physical attributes. And in the same way, we have Jacques Ellul, who is a French philosopher. I think he's French or maybe Swiss. I don't know. He's French, French philosopher, Basque, okay, from the southwest of France. He says, he wrote in 1977 in a book called Technological System, that the problem is to be able to reintegrate in the technological system external qualitative informations which could modify the whole process from the beginning. So yeah, this thesis is built on the same movement. Start from the technical points and go to and reintegrate in these technical issues also like aesthetic information, design issues, and that's it. And actually, there is a lot to be done because in France, and also like abroad, I suppose, there are quite a lot of new rules and regulation which have been created for all bio-based materials. And for example, there are this straw construction rules, and well, they are mainly developed by I think engineers science in civil engineer labs or also on construction sites. But I think architects should well take them and appropriate them and experiment them in renovating former houses. Because, yeah, there is one big issue I think about this, is that we should try to experiment an architectural language which is really based on these material properties, on their natural properties, and their physical properties, and not just based, for example, to 20th century materials aesthetics such as concrete or glass. For example, this school, which was built in Issy-les-Moulineaux, it's called the Louise Michel School, and it was designed by Sonia Cortés and Bernard Dufournet. And it's already quite a big, like, technical and regulatory achievements, because they achieved to like build quite a big school with straw and wood, but still in the architectural design, in the architectural language, I don't think it's really expressed. It's more linked, that this design is maybe more linked to, it could be also in concrete maybe, or it could have a concrete structure. And there is nothing that express, I think, really bio-based material in this kind of design. Well, that's a picture of how it was actually built. So they used like this big panel, straw panel, which were prefabricated in a factory. So the lecture will be about 4 main topics, which actually are the thesis 4 main topics. The first one is material execution, so how you build things, and how this material execution can have some kind of vitality in some ways, and how it interacts with aesthetics. So basically, it just says that how you are building influence aesthetic. The second one will be about maintenance. So how you some bio-based material needs some maintenance, and how it has aesthetics influences. And the third one will be about building processes meanings. And the fourth one, it will be more kind of question about which ornaments should we consider today. So let's start with material execution, vitality, and aesthetics. So, for example, this example was a rehabilitation of a former stable into a workshop. So it's a very small project actually, but we used like different local woods which have different properties. And so the cladding was made with chestnut tree. The window frame was made with cypress. The structure was made with Douglas fir. And yeah, for example, the cypress is very interesting to make this window frame because you can use it as green wood, so not dry. So you avoid to have like industrial drying of the wood, and it's still very stable. It keeps stable. It won't move while drying. So that's a very interesting quality. And it's water resistant. It's very lightweight, so when you don't have like a big machinery on the construction site, it's very well, it's very easy to manipulate, and you can be really precise because it has very fine grain, so you can have like a very small assemblage. You know, when you put 2 pieces of wood together, well, you see what I mean. And yeah, you can be really precise about it. Chestnut tree is really interesting too because it's resistant to water, but you have to use it in a smaller element because it's very unstable and it will move a lot during time. But for a cladding, it's not a problem because there are lots of nails everywhere. And Douglas fir is cool for wood frame because it's well, it's quite stable too. It's lightweight and it's quite cheap wood. And at the end, I think it creates like a kind of aesthetics when you have different woods, different wood colors, different grain, different texture. And actually you make the most of the biological and physical, well, you try to make the most of biological and physical properties of the wood, using them at the right place. And yeah, about that, like Simondon, who was also like a French philosopher. He wrote a book called On the Mode of Existence of Technical Objects in 1958. And he wrote about the concept of what he called concrétisation. And he says that he wrote that the concrete technical object that is sophisticated move towards natural objects' mode of existence. And it incorporates part of the natural world which intervene as an operating condition. So it means that you use like natural properties, like physical and biological properties of wood, and also maybe like if you think about the lecture we had yesterday, you can also use some kind of gesture to enhance those qualities, and yeah, to try to make the most of them. And also like Ingold, who is an English anthropologist, he says that the affiliation of knots and joints is not just a relation in the genealogy of techniques. At stake here, as Semper realized, is a much more fundamental question of what it means to make things. Thus, making proceeds through the hierarchical assembly of preformed parts into larger walls, and this later into still larger ones, until everything is joined up and complete? Or is it more like waving pattern from ever unspooling threads that twist and loop around one another, growing all the while without ever reaching completion? Is making a matter of building up or of carrying on? In the first case, the part may be regarded as components of a totality that already exists, albeit in the virtual form of an image, plan, blueprint in advance of the construction. But in the second, there are initially no parts and no walls. Rather, the form of things emerge from the process itself, within a field of forces, both tensile and frictional, established through the engagement of the practitioner with materials that have their own inclination and vitality. Consider the trade, it's any hats, consider the trade of a carpenter. Colloquially, he is known as a joiner. He's joined pieces of wood in making bolts, building, furniture, diverse utensils. Yet, in joining every piece, he cuts, shaves, and drills to make it fit fast, snug, beside its predecessor. These pieces are not parts to begin with. They are not, in that sense, the building blocks from which things are made. They only become parts as the work proceeds, and as they gradually acquire a feel for each other, holding each other even more tightly in place as the work advances asymptomatically towards completion, without ever finally reaching it. It is here that the affinity lies between joinery and knotting. The carpenter, no differently from the basket maker, waves with this woody material, and the form of the structure emerges from the wave. And yeah, so this means that material have their own inclination, but then the way you build them, the way you join them, step after step, it also creates some kind of architecture, some kind of pattern, and I think this is interesting to explore. So this was inside of the workshop. There is this wood frame we designed with small elements because we had like not big machinery on the construction site. This is the door, and well, it was funny because this door is also made of chestnut tree, and it was also like green wood, so not dried wood, and actually dried in place. And at the beginning, like all the cladding was really everything was closed, and there was not this black line, and they appeared as the wood dried. And I think it's interesting because well, it's part of kind of a process of weathering wood, and yeah, it asks us also of how we want to design, and if we accept like some kind of improvisation, or if we want like to master every detail and everything, or if we accept that there would be like some unfinished detail and some hazard too in the aesthetic of the building. This was on other construction sites, and so the wood frame was this one. But the first thing was to cut some trees, like in a field which was like 1 kilometer away from the house we were building. It's again chestnut tree because it's a very common wood in Brittany, and it's quite cheap. It's much cheaper than oak, and people don't use it really anymore except for wood firing. And it's a very good wood. It's hard wood, very resistant to water. And yeah, the general idea was to take advantage of the form of the tree to like maximize, the space which was we could use below, and also like to take advantage of the form of the tree to have a good load descent in the building. So you kind of enter in I don't know, dialectical relationship with the tree when you cut it, and you are starting to think, okay, this will go there, this will go there. And yeah, so I think it's interesting to have this kind of relation with the material you're working with. And as one of the hypotheses of this research is to actually experiment hand labor to reveal and take maximum advantage of this natural properties of material in order to save energy, to save materials, and to save labor. So for those who have seen the conference yesterday, I think it was pretty clear that if you just like take the trees as it is and just remove like the minimum amount of wood, and then you build your wood frame with this wood tree form in mind. It's very economical. It's very you don't need much energy to do it. And for example, when you are working with woods, it's much more easy if you work by hand to split the wood because it takes a lot of energy to cut it, and if you split it, it keeps all its mechanical properties, keeps all its resistant to water. So yeah, you kind of enhance its biological and physical properties. But yeah, once we have said that, like, what does it mean today? What does it mean for renovation, especially about the mining cities in the north? That's what I think this thesis wants to experiment. The second topic is about weathered wood maintenance and aesthetics. So I think we all know that now that wood is getting weathered when it's outside, so it can have like different colors, different depending on the species, of the orientation, of the local climate, of the exposure, of chance also actually. And well, it can be good, I think, to start to see how you can plan how it will be weathered and how it will change over time. All those materials like wood, straw and everything, bio-based material, most of them, they are biodegradable material. And so you have to adapt detailed building processes and details. So I think there are different solutions. Either you can protect them in a way that they won't be degraded. Either you can maintain them and repair them. And to protect them, well, you can have like large roofing or have stone which goes quite high for the foundations. But when you are working about renovation, it becomes hard to do that, to work with bio-based material and to protect them if you don't want to work with petrol material, like, because we use quite a lot of actually, if we go back to this picture here, then after that there is actually another picture which was better. Sorry about that. Yeah, here it's the same house, but then after the wood and the hemp, you have this kind of plastic film which come to protect all these materials. And inside there is another plastic film that comes to protect from humidity, and so you end to have like quite a lot of plastic inside your bio-based material. And even if it's different layers, like every layer has its own function, yeah, you still wonder, yeah, you can ask yourself, is it good, is it not good? But maybe you have to think about change in design processes if you want to allow people to be maintained it. So we will discuss it further. But first, I would like to quote again Simondon, who says that there should be no separation between construction and use. He says that it's the same process. So he wrote, on the opposite, technical objects which are not subjected to a division between construction and use do not deteriorate over time. They are designed in order to be able to continuously replace and repair the different parts that constitute them. Maintenance does not separate itself from construction. It extends it and sometimes finishes it. And well, Ingold, he says the same thing. Ingold, in making anthropology, archaeology, art, and architecture, he says the same thing, but maybe in a funnier way. He writes that, speaking about builders, working in a capricious and inconsistent environment, they must always try to resolve problems which could not be anticipated and fight with materials which are not necessarily willing to take the planned shape nor to maintain it. The idea of a building completion is in the best case a legal fiction. In reality, as Brand says, with some degree of frustration, we never end to end. It's worth saying that handing over the keys to the residents of a nearly finished building doesn't mean the work is finished. It's only then, as says the eminent Portuguese architect Álvaro Siza, that the real construction work begins, when residents start an endless fight against damages done by insects and rodents, against the rotting and infestation of fungi, and the corrosive effects of bad weather. Yeah, this is really interesting, I think, but it's also, it raises quite a lot of issues about how we are doing right now, renovation. For example, it questions guarantees in the building. In French, we have a guarantee for 10 years, but yeah, is it a good thing? Because if you have a guarantee for 10 years, then you can make materials that last only for 10 years and then it's finished. Whereas if you think about maintenance and if, for example, the builder or the designer, if he has to come back, like, I don't know, every 5 years on his building to see if everything is fine and if everything is working well. So a kind of, I don't know, post-design maybe a mission for architects or for builders. Well, maybe the maintenance would be better. So yeah, I think these bio-based materials, they raise several issues. So the first one would be to think more about water, about wind, about climate when we are designing. So for example, how the water will flow on materials, how it will, what could be the aging process of the building, and what kind of aesthetic could it create. And also a second issue, which is to think about maintenance. And for example, how will the residents or how the landowner maybe can maintain the building on their own? Yeah, can we organize like inhabitants formation or participation, as Melusine will be working on? What about building guarantees? Yeah, and again, I think we have to think about how we renovate things. So this kind of multi-layered facade, well, in a way, it's easy to replace one of the layers if it's damaged, but on the other hand, you don't see what's happening inside the wall when it's finished and when there is a cladding and everything. So yeah, is it a good way to do it? And the last question, I think, is actually, this was inside the house. And so we were using like only bio-based material for insulation and everything, but then you have finishings, which are sometimes quite normal finishings like plasterboards or yeah, sometimes you use like normal painting and everything. So it's kind of weird to have like all this bio-based material inside the wall, and then outside it's like a completely normal aesthetic, like conventional aesthetic. And yeah, this is like a layered construction, but maybe if you work more with massive techniques, I don't know, maybe it would well create or let us experiment a new architectural language, which is based more on chance, on unpredictability, on evolution, on weathered aesthetics. Whereas, yeah, this kind of aesthetic is more based on, you know, control, completion, achievement. You try to have like very sharp lines and geometrical designs and everything. I would like to quote someone else once again. It's Emily Brady, who was an American philosopher, and she's working about US philosopher, and she's working about environmental aesthetics, and especially in modified environments. So, for example, gardens or what else? In former mining areas too, in the fields. So she's working where she was doing philosophy about where nature and human activities they kind of enter in a relationship. And so she writes, speaking about earthworks and landscape arts, all artworks involve the action of artists. But when working with nature and environments, the artist is decentered to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the work in question and to what extent the artist chooses to interact with natural processes. With respect to natural materials and sites, it is more likely that there will be shaping, resisting, thwarting, and so on from both sides of the relationship. So yeah, to work with bio-based material, I think if you do it in a way where you try to have a real relationship, dialectical relationship with material, and also like in a way that you think about maintenance and maybe working with inhabitants and to integrate them in the design. It's a way to experiment an architectural language that leads more to predictability, and more to nature, to evolution, to climate, to local sites, and maybe a bit less architect-centered and drawing centered. And well, yeah, it's maybe a new way of another way of designing. I would like now to turn to building design processes, meanings, sorry. So what building processes means, and they're linked to aesthetic. So different bio-based construction have like different ecological, social, ethical, landscape consequences. For example, in France, like quite recently, there were two new techniques that appeared, rules for two new techniques, the rules for straw construction, which are here, and the rules for hemp construction. And it's two completely different logic. The straw construction rules, they are applied to the straw bale itself. That's the one you find in the field, and you can just take it from the field, you put it on the construction site. You have some experiments which are all explained in this book that you have to do on the construction site, and then you can use it in your building. Whereas hemp construction rules, it says you, okay, so there is hemp which is recolted harvested in the fields, and it has to go to an industrial which actually make a product with hemp which is certified. So on the one hand, you can have direct relation with the farmer, site tests. Also, the workers, they have to be to have some kind of formation, like a short training to be able to use these techniques. And when you are working with hemp construction, well, you're just like work like an installer. You just put a product, and that's it. And the other thing which is interesting is that with straw construction, you can also use, there is like a wall system which is made to use like a local site earth for plastering and everything. And there are also like tests which are explained to how use this local earth, local mud. Whereas with M construction, you have to use other industrial products with lime and but yeah, like industrial products. So it's two completely different, I think, logic. On one hand, it's like still very industrial, even if you use bio-based material. On the other hand, it's like very local logic and maybe more kind of direct and dialectical relationship with nature. And as Brady says, once again, what she writes, while some practices are problematic, others may be seen as genuine case of human interacting with nature in ways that generate aesthetic qualities that embody positive values through the harmonious interplay of artifactual intentionality and natural processes. So I think maybe this rule of this through regulation rules, they allow you to build houses, but even like buildings, schools, and everything, in a very respective, where you can build with nature, respecting it, not exploiting it. And I think it says us that aesthetical question are also linked to ethical question. For example, this kind of so this is another school built by Chaire Acclimater, which is a French office. It's in Boulogne, next to Paris, and I don't know, but I sometimes find it tough to find concrete beautiful now, because you know that there is no more sand, or there is like sand erosion, cost erosion. The cement is terrible for carbon emissions. It's not good for the workers because cement is very aggressive. It's not a nice material to work with. And so, yeah, sometimes you just think, okay, maybe like it has some aesthetical qualities, I don't know, but still it's hard to find it nice, because you know there is all this ecological backgrounds that you don't like. And well, again, Brady, she said that those ethical, economical, or ecological issues can lead to moral pressure placed on aesthetic appreciation. I think it's different when you are working, speaking about like a new building or an old building, because an old building, like maybe like, yeah, they didn't know about all these like ecological issues. But this is actually a weird example, because this big concrete wall, it was designed to be like a biodiversity wall, a bit like, you know, old stone wall, which have lots of plants and animals growing in it. And it's actually quite a success, because this picture is more recent, and after 3 or 4 years, there are much more plants and animals living there than were implemented at the beginning. So it's funny, because on one hand you have like this concrete, which is a bit like okay, you can say it's not ethic, but on the other hand, the buildings tell something new, maybe, or I don't know, about how we can live with other animals and other species, even in urban area. There is a good concept, which was I don't know if he invented it, but he says he found this name to explain this kind of relationship. So it's Morisot, it's a French philosopher and biologist, and he calls it like diplomacy with in France we call it vivant. It means like the living, or the more than human, sometimes it's called also in US books, or other than human. And another French philosopher, Latour, wrote a book in 2017, which is called Landing on Earth. And he writes that we should not seek to produce good for humans, starting from resources, but to generate what he calls terrestre, which means to cultivate attachments with animated and more than human in order to create living ground. And of course, like this diplomacy, so with the living, can create like aesthetics, and vegetal can also become like kind of a new ornament. And again, Brady, she has wrote about like copist woodland. So this copist woodland is like you know, like this woodland with small, very small poles, and they used it in the past to to harvest all these small poles to make all kind of canvas and baskets and everything. And she says, although there is little traditionally managed woodland now, woodland with a long history of copicing tend to have very rich flora and fauna, and is in some cases the only place in England where some species survive. This management system is generally recognized as increasing the biodiversity of both flora and fauna. What are the aesthetic qualities of this type of woodland? The characteristically rich bird songs and occasional sightings of animals add to the beauty offered by the plants, but it is to the plants that we want to turn. The variety of species is an often cited feature, both variety of trees and the floras, which the changing light density allows to flourish. Well, it is about like copist woodland, but I think we can say the same thing about the aesthetic of a building. So it's the materiality of the building, it's maybe the shape of the building, it's the way, I know, the window are integrating in the walls and everything, but it's also what kind of biodiversity it can shelter. And yeah, maybe it can be a new way to think about aesthetics. Not to say that everything should be everything should flourish everywhere, but maybe we can enter in this dialectical relationship with some species. More broadly, actually, I would like to introduce another concept which is interesting. I think it's a concept of aesthetic regard. For example, it's a warehouse which was also built with chestnut tree again. And so the trade parts, they were cut in the tree trunk, so like the straight part, and all the sinuous part were cut in the different branches. And yeah, it's tried to, in a way, to make the most of the tree, like to use all of it and not just to use like a small part of it, and to yeah, start designing with the shape of the tree and to see how it enter in relation with wood frame techniques and how it interacts with them. I can again quote Brady, who wrote that many artworks may be said to constitute a form of aesthetic regard for nature. That regard emerges through an interaction of cultural and natural forces, rather than an expression of natural law or human cultural law. Regard has several meanings, which make it an especially useful concept for capturing both aesthetic and moral concerns. The first group of meaning points to ways of carefully attending to or giving something detailed consideration. We are not suggesting that aesthetic experience is limited to looking at something, but this mode of experience often begins with attentive perception, especially attending to and engaging with various qualities through the range of senses. Building upon the idea of careful attention, another set of meanings can be tied to respect and esteem. To regard something is to care for, to look after, to respect, to show deference toward it. Brought together, careful attention points to how aesthetic regard is integrated into positive relationship between artists and the natural world. So yeah, I think it's interesting to start like looking at like more attentively to all these materials, to really engage with them and not to see them like as a natural product. And like as we're in Venise, we can do like a kind of parallel like of architects in the 19th or in the beginning of the 20th century doing their grand tour to you know, like learn all the experiments in the antiquities in Roman and Greek architecture. And we could imagine an alternative tour which would explore like all the inclinations of natural materials and experiment with them and try to understand what they want to be. And for example, yeah, the form of the tree, should it fit in the wood frame? This is the case. Like this is a very normal wood frame for like a warehouse, but or should it change it in a way? So I think we arrive here at the last part of this conference, which is which ornaments today can be like what can be like contemporary ornaments. So more recently, I've been working in heritage restoration, also as a carpenter. This is a building in Aix-les-Bains, which is like a thermal city in the Alps, not far from Switzerland. And it was like a thermal hotel, so with like a very luxurious design and expressive design. And it was made to look like very very luxurious, very monumental. And there is actually a lot of ornaments in woods and in zinc. So it's like quite a lot of painted woods. And we were working on the corniche, which was above, which is entirely made of wood, and we had to restore it. All those this is like made out of zinc, actually. So these huge ornaments are made out of zinc, and it's a bit weird because it would maybe be easier to do it with plaster, but I think they needed to be like very fast because it was like a building made to make money. Basically, it's an hotel, and so to work with zinc, to work with wood, it's a very easy way to prefabricate everything in the workshop, and then you just have to install them on the construction site. The building was built in 1906. So this was from below, and this is from above. So basically, everything was completely destroyed and rotten. The corniche also had a gutter on it. You can see it here, to collect the rainwater from the roof. And yeah, that was the section. So there was like this kind of wood frame structure, which was sealed in the walls, and then all those wood pieces were actually making the ornamentation. And here is the gutter. And yeah, when working on that, it was not clear for that if the architect thought that a gutter is needed. So a corniche is a way to actually design an elegant gutter, or if it's the opposite, like we have to make a corniche and then we ask ourselves what can it be used for. So yeah, we can just put the gutter on it. But I think it's both, like it goes in the same reflection. Yeah, so we can ask ourselves if this kind of so yeah, we had to restore some of them. So for example, this was in the workshop, and you have to remake this decor, and it's not so complicated because the tools haven't changed that much actually for in 1 century. The complicated thing is that you have much more safety regulations now, so you have to still a little bit adapt the way you are making it. But yeah, you could ask yourself, could we like design ornaments like this today? Would it be like an aesthetic affront to nature? Because yeah, it's really weird. It has like no link between the form which is created and the wood's natural properties. It's painted after even this one is like dried wood with a lot of glue, so it's more stable actually, and it's easier to work. So you could think, yeah, that's weird to do that. But on the other hand, processing with the wood, even if you like create this weird design, you still have to be very attentive about the grain of the wood, about in which sense the fiber is. And you have to imagine how it will deform over time to work it in the good way. So I think it leads us to the question that we are addressing in this workshop, like which is well, one of the questions can be, is the link that we want to do between bio-based material and ornaments, should it be like completely literal, expressive, or maybe it's more in the process of making that it's interesting? Yeah, on what ground can we actually design today's ornaments? Well, it can be designed maybe on aesthetic grounds only. For example, this kind of ornaments. It can be design linked to like natural and physical properties. It can be designed to ethical issues, maybe also to the search for a kind of diplomacy with living thing. Or is this like is there like a technical use for all the ornaments? Is it like an ornament which is made for to help for maintenance of the building? Yeah, all this kind of question. And I think I have like a last quotation by Jonathan Prior, I don't know how to say it, is a teacher in Cardiff University, and he's also working about, he's also like a philosopher, and he's also working about relation between nature and culture. And he has been writing about former mining areas restoration, and especially about landscape, about Parc Penalta in Cardiff. So he says, because of the explicit synthesis of nature and culture in the making of the park, and because of the focus on populist landscape utility and movements, we see the emergence of an aesthetic character of functional beauty, rather than naturalistic or wild aesthetic qualities. Parson and Carson, outside functional beauty, as the things aesthetic qualities emerging from its function or something closely related to its function, such as its purpose, use, or end. However, it seems necessary to modify this understanding of relationship between aesthetic qualities and function from only the former emerging from the later to the former emerging alongside the later. So he says that basically we should not separate like functional thinking and maybe aesthetic reflection, but we could do the same at the same time, both at the same time. And then he adds, I think this is also interesting, this was done, however, in a way that resisted the full spatial aesthetic integration of the park within the wider landscape. Indeed, the restorationists rejected the total naturalization of the cultural landscape through popular artistic representations of coal mining, their disinclination to conceal the coal substrates from which a park has been carved, the manner in which the park was officially opened, and the conscious production of functional rather than naturalistic or wild beauty. As a result, we see the representation of popular cultural landscape qualities that is markedly different to the cultivation of elitist aesthetic qualities that obscures not only the forces and relation of production, but also more plebeian, less pictorial experience of nature. Aesthetics then become a mean to project desired dialectical relation between nature and culture to the point where aesthetics and ethics at Parc Penalta are inseparable. So actually you can both think function and beauty together. Think functional about like technique, about uses, about habitability of ornaments, and also of the materiality of building processes. And at the same time, you can think aesthetics about senses, about dialectical relationship with other being, about proportion, about aesthetic evolution. And yeah, just to finish, we had a discussion with Beatrice yesterday, and we are wondering if that could be like a kind of popular aesthetic, I would say. And it was interesting because we were thinking that like in all the former farms or everything, just to have like a beautiful wood frame or a beautiful wall or a door with some nice curving around it, but sometimes very simple. People know how to relate to that. They know it's beautiful and everything. They find it beautiful. And sometimes maybe with more architect-centered aesthetics, which is more about just the light or just senses and more abstract maybe aesthetic, I think it's more difficult for people to relate to that kind of aesthetic issue. So yeah, I think it raises question when you want to actually renovate buildings which are inhabited by people, existing building. I think we should consider this kind of issues about how acceptable are our aesthetic concern and design issues. That's it.
I was interested when you said that is like I don't remember the exact words, but is building about finishing it or building it, or is it about carrying on? Because what I find interesting is that we used to, or we still have you or some craftsmen who really have lived with that material or their 50 years of experience and they know how to do it. And sometimes it just goes away, like there's a discontinuity, so this doesn't get carried on, especially now. So I feel like that's a break in the whole system. But maybe you could share some experience of working with people that are find these gems of people who have this experience of how you are carrying it on.
Yeah, well, it's especially the case actually about heritage building. So, yeah, for example, this we can talk about this. So we had to. It's quite big actually because it's like 30 centimeters wide. So it's quite a big ornament. And actually, they hadn't done it in the company I was working for. They don't do it so often, so they have actually to refine how you do that, because you can't do it in just one. You take it through the machine, but they won't work in one way. You have to take it several times to actually create it, and so you have to. You have to be like with older people that explains you how to work with it and how to do everything. And another thing, I haven't worked on this. Start again about like Lyon Cathedral. I'm going to talk about that. So it was more about masonry actually. And they had to ask for a guy who was retired to come back to do like to come back and to teach young people how to do like it was to sculpt a very complicated stone, which was in a very difficult area to access. And so they had to call back this guy, which was retired to teach young people. Yeah, that's really cool actually. And but I think as long as you keep doing like reparating, renovating like all this building, the people will learn how to renovate them, and the knowledge is kept. I think it's when the buildings start to crumble and everything. Well, of course, the knowledge is lost, because if you don't have anything to train, even if you do like. When you are doing your apprenticeship, you do like some trial in school and everything. You have to try it on like real buildings to maintain a real knowledge about things. So yeah, I think it's interesting because it's also one thing I would like to say is that craftsmen are always very happy when you give them something to make which is nice, not nice, but complicated, or which challenge them. The routine can be very, very boring as a craftsman. Like sometimes they are long, and when you have someone who comes to discuss with you with your drawing and with, I don't know, kind of shape, a weird shape, or it's really interesting. And you know, it's not that kind of minimalist aesthetic. It's more like a bit more complicated, I know, but I think it's more interesting when you are as a workman, when it's more interesting to make like a beautiful wood frame rather than a very minimalistic wall where you basically don't have anything to do.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's very interesting. What I really abstract is the paradox between the willing of using new materials like straw, for example, like this straw to show this house in wood that you showed,
Mm-hmm.
and like this picture, for example, and the imagination, the aesthetic that stays very modern.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's interesting to, especially when it's a private house, because when it is school, it's more matter of the architect not being able of creating a new magic.
mm-hmm.
But for a house, it's very interesting to consider that the client could imagine having a house with
Oh, it's built with hemp, chanvre and wood, and
not trying to consider another image to really be more demonstrative about and proud that his house is that
Yeah.
concrete. And
yeah,
we have to realize that it's been a century that we've been building concrete now, and that all the modern aesthetic has really settled down.
yeah,
And,
yeah, for sure.
and it was kind of difficult to settle. And now it's very difficult to get rid of it, you know? And so I think it's very interesting that it's something which is not sold,
Mm-hmm.
which is the finish,
Yeah,
the finishing.
and it's also linked to, I think it's also linked to this, the way we are using mostly like bio-based material today. Like, for example, this was very layered construction.
Yeah.
So at the end, you have like the plaster sheet, and yeah, it just looked like a random plaster sheet, even if it's like in a wood house.
So maybe there's a lot of research to do on finishing products to be able to change the image.
Because well, there is this kind of house, and I think there is also like people who are doing like constructing themselves their houses. I think there are really two way of doing it. Some people do it like with very industrial materials because it's very efficient and you can build your house very fast. And some others that do it like the cheapest way you can do it. So with the straw you find just next to your house and the mud which is below. And on this case, I think, well, the aesthetic will be completely different because you have like mud plastering and everything. But well, in most of the houses I've seen, I think it's more, I'm not sure there is like aesthetic reflection, conception, thinking about them. It's more like, okay, there has to be a plaster, so let's do it. But there is no real thinking. But
still, there's aesthetic thinking behind
it. Yeah, in a way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm saying that, but actually, yeah.
People build it by themselves, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
Because maybe they are not aware of the aesthetic that they project, but I think they still are.
They're creating one.
Yeah, it's created by what they look at.
Perhaps they are not ready to what we use.
Maybe, yeah.
It was almost the same at the end of the 18th century when the engineers began to introduce steel in the architecture, but you have already all the classical facade to everything.
They have the stone,
It takes time to introduce
to be confident enough to
Break.
to break the use.
I'm not sure if I understood it right, but we showed this concrete building
Yeah.
next to Paris.
This guy.
And I think you said that making there the ornamental is created by living plants, and I think it's really interesting because I mean, there are lots of concrete buildings to deal with, and yeah, I like the idea of ornamentics, not only by those that we see here, for example, but by living as well. It's an interesting thought. Is thinking of how to tell you what you want to use and the raw materials, like nature and human activity together.
Yeah, to create some like dialectical relationship. And I think as a facade, but this multi-layered facade, it's also interesting because it can create different, like it's mostly quite bigger than it was before. It has like more depth. So, and maybe you can also, well, we often say that you can inhabit the facade as humans, but also for other people, let's call it like that, and make shelters for a bit everyone. But they are now working because I think they are well aware, Chaire Acclimater, they are aware that it's not maybe the best way to do that, like making like new concrete buildings and everything.
No.
And now they are working on, it's interesting, they're working on a mud building, where the facade would just grow, like, but on the mud facade, basically, working with mud. Instead, they are trying to, because here you have like concrete, and then there is like a substrate, some earth which is put in it, so plant grows, and they want the whole facade to become like the soil in a way for plants to grow.
But is it just a skin of concrete which is added to the building?
In this case, yeah, actually, yeah. It's just I've seen the detail, and apparently it's just because so you have like a regular concrete frame, a wall.
Yeah.
Then there is insulation.
Yeah.
Then there is like some kind of it's very complicated insulation. Then there is like a partie, like a plastic film. Then some ventilation space, and then this other concrete facade which is added in front of it. So that makes quite a lot of materials. And well, this cool also, I didn't show at the top, there is like also like a huge green roof and everything. So yeah, in one way it's interesting because it integrates green in the city, but on the other, and I'm sure there is like much more concrete which was used because everything must be so heavy and oversized and everything. Yeah, it's a bit weird, yeah. But I think there are other ways to design this kind of facade and this kind of to experiment with this issue of diplomacy with living, but in a more interesting way, and especially when you are renovating and not in new buildings.
Talking about organization and especially wood, I was wondering how much place does the biofuel skills take place, and how much place the machine wants to take place? Because now we are seeing cities doing gray, dividing. Is it just designing, or do you have
to do that, for example? There are several ways to do it. Actually, you could do it like with a 3D router, which would just go around it. But there are not that many of them in France actually right now, and so this is done like the traditional way, like kind of traditional way, but with this machine which is below, and it's a very simple machine. There is just like a blade which is turning very fast, and you just take your wood. Like your wood pieces, and you go along these blades, and it creates this shape here. But yeah, and you like I think in the beginning of the 20th century, it was done the same. And well, it's pretty evident because it's doing it by hand. I think you wouldn't do it that way. And maybe if you were working by hand, well, it wouldn't be as regular. And maybe you would have had, I think, more details or more, if you see, like, for example, a medieval wood frame, most of the time, they have more, like, more complicated shape. And here, I think it's because, like, you use a machine, so you make it straight and quite simple in a way. But it's also interesting. I mean, it's like a beautiful line and everything, but it's not the same results, I suppose. But about the digital, I don't know. I think it's well, maybe it's interesting to work with the digital. Well, I wanted maybe more to experiment working by hand during this thesis and working to see what can we do with also inhabitants, with medicine, and what kind of ornaments can it create when you're working by hand and by the inhabitants, with the inhabitants.
You told that your thesis will take place in the Congress.
Yeah.
How do you think you will apply this to conceive ideas in order to be specific of the outsourcing?
Thank you for the question. It's not that clear yet, but I think it's a great challenge. Yeah, I was thinking. So, for example, yesterday we had a conference by Frédéric Epo, who was so he was speaking about oak, les structures en chêne, les charpentes, les cathédrales, etc. Et wood frame which were made with axe, I think it's ash, was for ash, axes, and how it preserves like natural qualities of and physical, biological properties of the roots, and how it improve its mechanical properties. And I was thinking one way, very simple way of like making it more contemporary and usable for renovation, for example, would be to say, okay, as for the straw regulation rules, how could you just take, a tree which is next to your house, cut it, and use it in your building, to renovate it, and to be like following these regulations, and it will allow you to have like all the insurance and all the. You see what I mean? Or not? Maybe I should try to explain again. Yeah, the purpose is to try to work with inhabitants, but so I think you have to, if you want to do that and work with bio-based material, you have to also reconsider the way the construction rules are made, are written, especially for the social housing. So I was thinking, because there are like lots of techniques now and lots of that use natural material in a, like, let's call it harmonious way with these materials, like not considering them as products. And I think it's interesting to be able to integrate this way of doing in more like to make them become conventional. And I think to do that, you have to write rules about them, but write rules that doesn't like close what you can do, but that's allow people to do. And yeah, that's what I was trying to explain with the straw construction rule, is that it's it helps you to make it helps you to build with the straw of the neighbor, the farmer next door. It's not like it's not saying, okay, you should put this kind of products and then this kind of product on it. And I think, yeah, so this kind of rules which open possibilities in a way are very interesting. It could be very useful to renovate houses, and especially in social housing where you have to follow the rules basically. I don't know if it's clear. It's not completely clear for me yet, so. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.